Well, there might be nothing worse than being stuck on an airplane and they say it's going to be a while. You ever been there? I mean, could you imagine being a part of the people trying to get home over the holidays when Southwest had their glitch? And by the way, that costs, they estimate, around $800 million because of a technical glitch. I don't know if there's anything worse than being stuck on an airplane in a delay. And what's even funnier, I don't know if it's funny, but 2 weeks after that, they had another kind of glitch, right? And 49% of their flights in one day was delayed. We don't like delays. I don't like delays. I don't like to wait for things. I don't like being told I'm going to have to wait for things. You don't. I don't. Airline delays are probably the worst, okay? There's nothing worse than sitting in a seat and they're saying, well, it's going to be a bit, We don't like game delays, especially if it's cold or something like that. We don't like rain delays. We don't like supply chain delays because they just mess up the things we need, when we want them, how we want them, all of those things. Just as people in general, we don't like delays. Why? Well, because delays are out of our control, right? When we're told we have to wait, when we're told it's not going to be on the time we want it to be on, when we're told it's not going to be exactly the way we were anticipating, or it's going to mean a different route, or it's going to mean a different, obstacle or whatever, it's out of our control. We have no control. We're kind of at the mercy of whatever's happening. And so we don't like that. But some delays, well, they are in our control, right? People regularly delay things. You regularly delay things. I regularly delay things. We do, and sometimes we delay things because we have good reasons for delaying those things, and sometimes we delay things and we don't have good reasons to delay those things. I mean, has there ever been a time, even though you don't like delays, has there ever been a time where you chose to delay something? Has there ever been a time in your life, in your marriage, in your parenting, in your career, in your spiritual journey where you've chosen to delay something? We do this all the time, right? Sometimes there's decisions that need to be made. My favorite thing to say is, well, I'll make that decision tomorrow. Maybe it's a big decision, right? Maybe you should, think about it some or whatever, but often we delay decisions. Sometimes we delay purchases, something we really want, maybe we don't have the money or the resources or whatever, but we delay purchases. Some of us should delay purchases. Sometimes we delay the deadlines. We needed to have this done by this time or have this done then, but then something happened, and so we just pushed back the deadline. Sometimes, some of it, I did this. I delayed college. I took, I don't remember how many semesters off before I went to college. It wasn't a good idea, but I delayed it because I wanted to do something else, Some of us have delayed career changes or things we needed to do or new jobs or whatever. Others of us, we've delayed marriage, We've delayed wanting to make that commitment, or maybe we got burned in the past and we just, we want to take longer this time around or whatever. Some of us, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, especially the marriage thing, but parenting, some of us delay parenting. Well, I don't want to have kids when I'm younger, I want to have some time and all this, and so people are having kids later. And some of us, we choose to delay making changes. We just choose to delay it. We're just like, well, I know I need to make that change, but let me eat this ice cream sundae, okay? And then someday I'll make that change. I mean, have you ever thought about why you delay? And usually we delay for two reasons. There may be an outlier somewhere, but mainly two reasons. The first one is we need more time. That's why we delay. Not ready. I need to make some more preparations, I need to get some more understanding. I need to enjoy that one more time. Or I need some time to pull the resources together, or I need just some more clarity. Shouldn't I have more clarity before I make this decision? I just need more time because I just need to decide, is this really what I want? Is this really the path I want? Do I really want to be with her forever? All of these kinds of things. So sometimes we delay because we need more time. And sometimes that's probably a good idea, but sometimes it's not. The other reason why we delay is because you have more time. You're like, well, I have time. I don't need more. I just have more. I'm only 17. What does it matter what decisions I make today about where I go to college and how long I take to start college and all this kind of stuff? Or maybe we're young and we're like, well, I'm just still learning, or this is still early in the marriage, or whatever, or I've still got, some more time left. We just imagine that we have more time, even though it's important. It's not due yet, like, what does it matter if I make this decision today or next week? Like, I've got more time. I've got the rest of this year. I've got the rest of this decade, like whatever it might be. All of us, one time or another, have either chosen a delay, or we've been delayed. It wasn't in our control, but we've been delayed. And all series long, this series that we've called Simply Jesus, we've been asking this question: what do you want to hear this year? What do you want to hear when we get to the end of this year? What is it that you want to look back and say, that got better? Finally, there was peace about that. Finally, I achieved peace with them. Not the kind of peace to where we can make it work and nobody notices, but really, I felt good about my marriage. Really, I felt good about my pursuit with Jesus. Finally, the arrow is pointing up. It's been either down or just steady. And finally, I've been able to turn this into momentum, and this relationship is getting better. I'm getting better. I'm transforming, and my faith is taking off. What do you want to hear at the end of this year? And there is a future, or there has been a future that you want to hear, and you want to hear it. And you want it here, now. You want it to be reality right now about you and your faith journey and your discipline and your marriage and your relationship with your kids and all the things that you want to transform and change. You want that here, right now. But it's delayed. And for some of us, it's been delayed year over year over year over year. And some of us in that start to wonder, shouldn't this happen already, Like, why not? Why can't I? God, why can't you? Like, we've been wanting this to finally go the direction it needs to go. What's the delay? What's the delay? What's behind this taking so long? What's behind me not doing what I need to do? Why am I still here? Facing that, struggling with that. What's behind this? What's behind this delay? Why is there a delay between what I want to hear and right here, right now? See, most of us have identified the destination. We know where we want to go. We know what we want this to look like. We know what we'd like to be and how we'd like to be. And now you're waiting for departure. But there's a delay. And Jesus, the Son of God, speaks into seasons and times of delay. And a specific delay that we're going to look into today happens in Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4, starting in verse 16. Jesus returns to his hometown of Nazareth. And everybody in his hometown, they saw, baby Jesus, and they saw, 12-year-old Jesus, and 20-year-old Jesus, and carpenter Jesus, and they knew his dad, and they knew his brothers and sisters, and all these kinds of things. And Jesus had just started his ministry, and he had just went on a tour of Capernaum, and he had done so many wonderful things, and word had got back to everybody in Nazareth, people that Jesus went to school with in Nazareth, and they heard all the great and marvelous things that he was doing. And here they are in Nazareth, the people that Jesus grew up with, and they're waiting for him to come home. They're waiting and wondering, when is it going to be our turn? When are we going to see some of that? When are we going to be able to engage with you, Jesus, like we just heard that you were engaging? So this is kind of the setting of this delay that I want to unpack for you in Luke chapter 4, starting in verse 16. Here's how it reads. Jesus went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And on the Sabbath day, which would have been Saturday, he went into the synagogue as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And you can just hear the silence in the room as Jesus is clearly making a declaration about who he is, reading his own word about who he is. Then, verse 20, he rolled up the scroll, he gave it back to the attendant, and he sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. He began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." And this is the way a regular teaching time would have began. So it's a very normal setting. You stand up to read the section of scripture, and then the rabbi or the teacher sits down and begins to teach. And we only get one line of Jesus' message, the most important line. We only get one line. I imagine there was more things that he went on to say, but he began his message by saying something basically like this: "I have something to say. No more delay. You've been hearing, you've been waiting, you've been frustrated. Generation after generation has been waiting for God to move and send his chosen one into the world. There has been delay after delay after delay, but I have good news. This is your year. The time of the Lord's favor. There will be transformation and freedom and recovery of sight, and we will see all kinds of things done right here and right now because I am here. God has come to be with you." Verse 22. After Jesus finishes his message, all spoke well of him. And they were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. "Isn't this Joseph's son?" they asked. And his message was exactly what they wanted to hear. I mean, they liked what they heard. Who doesn't want to hear about transformation and hope and healing? And they just heard that he did this in the town, not too far away. And so they're just wondering, and they just love the idea of this transformation. And now here's what they're thinking. All right, let's see it, Joseph's son. Let's see some of that we heard about. Let's see what you can do. And we can't really tell what happens between verse 22 and verse 23, but something happened. Something is happening in between these verses, because it seems like they were huge fans of Jesus, and then Jesus starts saying some things that help us understand that something's not right in that synagogue on that day. And because of that, there's a delay. There are no miracles. There is no freedom, for the blind that day. There is no activity that they were all hoping to see. Verse 23, Jesus said to them, "Surely you will quote this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself.' And you will tell me, 'Do here in your hometown what we have heard that you did in Capernaum.'" And so Jesus telling us this proverb, what is Jesus saying? Well, there's some kind of lack of belief or spirit in his hometown synagogue because they quoted this proverb to him. And what it basically means is, how is a doctor who is sick able to heal other people. And so what are they saying? You're human just like us. You're nobody special. They were struggling to believe that the person they were raised with was the one that God was choosing to bring transformation. And so they were at a place of, well, we need to see some proof. We need to see some of that before we start believing in that. And this lack of faith, this lack of trust in what Jesus said, this lack of ability to simply listen to Jesus, left Jesus unable to help and unable to heal. And then over the next couple of verses, Jesus begins to unpack examples from past experiences in Israel's history where people didn't receive what they should have received, and it was delayed. And that delay, the thing that they were wanting, was completely in their control. It was just because they were choosing. They were choosing not to listen. They were choosing not to receive what it was that God or a prophet or Jesus himself had to say. And I like what Matthew writes in Matthew chapter 13 on a different occasion, and it really unpacks what's going on in this hometown synagogue and all of these people, and sometimes in us. And it's Matthew chapter 13, and I'm going to read it out of the Message translation because it just hits your heart a little bit differently. And I just want to read this because this is what's happening. This is why they're seeing a delay. Matthew 13, verse 11 says, "He replied, 'You have been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works. Not everybody has this gift, this insight. It hasn't been given to them. Whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understandings flow freely. But if there is no readiness, any trace of receptivity soon disappears. That's why I tell stories, to create readiness, to nudge the people toward a welcome awakening. In their present state, they can stare till doomsday and not see it. Listen till they're blue in the face and not get it. I don't want Isaiah's forecast repeated all over again. Your ears are open, but you don't hear a thing. Your eyes, they're awake, but you don't see a thing. The people are stupid. They stick their fingers in their ears so they won't have to listen. Screw their eyes shut so they won't have to look, so they won't have to deal with me face to face.'" And I love this last part. "And let me heal them." There was something blocking Jesus' hometown people from hearing what Jesus had to say. Why is what you want to hear about you and about the transformation you hope to see, why is it not here yet? Why are you not seeing the transformation you've prayed for, you're hoping to get inspired to today? Well, to Jesus' hometown, Jesus says this: your lack of hearing is causing the delay. That's what's causing it. That's why you're not there. That's why here isn't now. It's your lack of hearing. It's because you're not receiving and believing what I have to say. And in this particular instance, that I am the chosen one of God, sent to save the world. And here's how this whole situation wraps up. It's quite the turn. Verse 28 of Luke chapter 4. All the people in the synagogue, after Jesus sort of rebukes them, well, they were furious when they heard this. They got up, they drove him out of the town, and they took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off a cliff. People don't like delays. And they were about to throw Jesus to his death because he was delayed. But really what was happening is their hearing was causing the delay. And it went from, look at his gracious words, to, we don't like what you have to say. We don't trust what you have to say. And so what are we going to do? We're going to push you away, Jesus. And that's what they did. They pushed Jesus away. They just pushed him away, causing a delay. And what happened? They stayed the same. They experienced no transformation. They experienced no healing. They experienced no newness because they pushed Jesus away because they didn't like what he had to say. And all they had to do, all they had to do was simply listen. If they simply listen to Jesus, what happens? They're healed. They're healed. They could be healed. And is the reason what you want to hear never gets here, is the reason that your marriage never turns into what it needs to be, is the reason that your life is so flatlined in its growth, is the reason that your faith is struggling, is the reason that you're not the father or the mother that you want to be, is the reason that you don't have the transformation you seek, is the reason a hearing and a receiving problem. Maybe why you don't have that transformation, maybe why you don't have that freedom, maybe why you can never hear what you want to hear, is it possible that you have a delay? And the delay is there because what you need is on the other side of hearing something that Jesus has to say. And here is where you are. You can't hear it. Or you won't hear it, or you don't like to hear it, or maybe less intentional, you just forget. You just forget to hear it. You just forget to understand that the you that you want to be is in and through a posture of being under Jesus. Jesus was asked one time, hey, if there's only one thing that we could hear from the scriptures, like the most important thing, like out of all of the commandments, out of all of the stories and all the history and all the lessons and all the wisdoms, like if there's only one thing we could hear, if there's only one thing we should memorize, if there's only, what's the most important one? What's the most important words that you ever said, God? Like, let's just get to the top. Like, what's the most important? And when he was asked that, he actually quoted a verse from the Old Testament in Deuteronomy. And this verse in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy, is the most prayed, the most memorized, the most instilled into a Jewish person's mind, even in Jesus' day verse. And so Jesus quotes it because of its importance, but also because this is the world he grew up in. And it starts like this, Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear. We can't move past that. We like to move past that when Jesus does this, when he's asked this question, but no, we have to just pause. The most important thing you can do starts with the ability to hear. Starts with the ability to listen and to receive. And the word Deuteronomy, by the way, it literally means the repeated law, or like the second giving of the law. And so clearly the nation of Israel didn't hear it the first time because they forgot, or they rejected it, or they didn't like it, or they didn't do it. And so Moses is having to give the law again, and it starts like this. Hear. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The Lord is one. So, if you're experiencing delay, to begin to end that delay starts in this passage. You need to be able to hear and understand someone. God. do you comprehend and understand God? Like who God is, what he says, why he says it, and why I need to hear it. So important if we ever want to get to where we want to get in our journey. And the intro verses in this chapter, before the most important thing that we haven't even said yet, is Deuteronomy 6, verse 1. And these really help us understand the context, and I want to pull these out. So verse 1 says, "These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you, to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping all," my favorite word in the Bible, "all of his decrees and commands that I give you, so that you may enjoy long life." And so for the nation of Israel, God was the one that pulled them out of slavery, blessed their nation, took them on a journey, gave them a law, showed up in wonderful ways, and all along the while they struggled with wanting to follow him. They struggle with remembering to follow him. They struggle with not wanting to be like other people and other nations and all of these kinds of things. And so at the beginning of this passage, Moses is trying to remind them, God is the one who freed us, who loves us, and he wants a good future. Put it this way, God, he wants to end my delay. We've been wandering for 40 years. He wants to end our delay. What has kept us wandering for 40 years? Our inability to listen. God wants to help you here this year. He wants to give you a good and joyful and thriving and healthy, transforming life. Did you notice that? So that you may enjoy long life. That's what God wants for you. That's what he wants for his people. That's who God is. And so not only do we know who God is, we can look at this text and go, we know what God is saying to do, and we know why. He wants to give us a pathway to guarantee that enjoying long life future. What is it? His commands. His directives. His words. He's giving us the pathway so that it will go well for me. He's handing it to us, saying, here it is. Here's my words to guide you to this future. So what's the delay? We have what we need in our hands. What do we need to hear? Verse 3 of Deuteronomy 6 says, "Hear, Israel." And here it is. "And be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you." The reason why we don't hear what we want to hear year after year, week after week, the reason why you don't see change or progress or spiritual growth, the reason why you're still selfish, the reason why you struggle with humility, the reason why is because there is a delay between hear and obey. It's that simple. There is a delay between hear and obey. And the Hebrew word for obey is a very interesting word. It's asah. It means several things. Here it means to obey. It can also mean to observe. It's used by God in Genesis to create. Like when he literally makes things, it's hasa. And so to create the life you want, to create the life you believe that God may have for you, what do you need to do? You need to obey. You need to be at work. It's another way you could say it. You need to advance. You need to produce. You can't just listen and listen and listen and receive and receive and receive and not asa. That's how you create the future. See, we regularly position ourselves to hear God. We even understand God, but we don't do what he says. We reject it. Sometimes we grow tired of it. Sometimes we wish we didn't have to do what he said. Sometimes we get distracted from it. Sometimes we pay lip service to it. Why do we do this? Delay. We delay. We understand. Well, James says this, James chapter 4, verse 13, he says, now listen, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go to this or that city, we will spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why you don't even know what will happen tomorrow? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if this is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. And then lean into this last part. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do, doesn't do it, it is sin for them. If anyone delays between hear and obey, it's sin for them. What has God said to you? You know what to do. What has God said to you, and you know what to do, and you don't do? And you have some reasons. I know it's hard. I know it's going to cost you. I know it's challenging. I know, it's uncomfortable. It means denying yourself. It means getting inconvenient, and we can't have inconvenience in this day and age. And James points out how we foolishly and arrogantly think that we have more time. So we delay. Well, I've got more time. I don't have to do that today. I'm going to do something else today. Tomorrow, the next day. And so we delay. We delay because we think we have more time. Have you ever heard of the student syndrome? It's basically a fancy way to say procrastination. And it's estimated that 80% of college students struggle with procrastination. You're familiar with this. You probably did this. I mean, you wait up until it's due to start doing, right? Absolutely, And the reason why you do that is because you perceive how much time you have, right? And so what happens? You begin to prioritize things you want to do first, things more enjoyable first. Maybe for some of us, it's because we're not clear about the directions or the instructions of the assignment. For others, it's a fear thing. It's an anxiety thing, sitting down and I don't want to mess this up or whatever. But 50% of college students report this is a major problem, the student syndrome. Having all of this time and then waiting until the deadline to get on it, which, by the way, produces less quality work. And this is what we do. This is what we do. As soon as we get the information of what we need to do, we just go, I have time to get on that today. I've got some other things. And we delay. There's 2 shifts that will help you to obey and to advance so that you can end this delay and start heading to your destination. And the first thing is you need to change the deadline of obey to today. What if your kids were like, I'm going to obey tomorrow, Dad? You're not so gracious with them, but God is so gracious with us. And here's what you need to do. If you learn something you need to do towards a better future, a better marriage, a better self, whatever, a better relationship with God. The deadline's today to do something to get there. Otherwise, it'll never get here because the deadline will always be in the future because you have time. And now we get to the famous line of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. The most important thing that the Bible says according to Jesus. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. That I give you today, they're to be on your hearts. Not delayed. They're to be on you. Because it's so critically important to getting to the life that God wants to lead you to. What God gives you to do today is never meant to be delayed. And so here's the second shift. And this one's going to maybe poke you a little bit because it did me. I still don't like it. And maybe that's saying something. Change the deadline to today, and then this one's more of a question. Do you love to obey? I told you it was going to feel a little weird to say it like that. But do you love it? Do you love to obey your pathway to what you want to hear at the end of this year? What is your pathway? The words of God, the commands of God, the teachings of Jesus. And not just hearing them, obeying them. Do you love to obey today? Because that's what's going to end the delay. Obedience to the words of God is how this begins to get better. It's how you begin to make progress. Every day, obeying what you hear God say. That is your pathway to get where you want to get at the end of this year. Love is the way to end the delay between hear and obey. So what can you do? I hope it's so obvious. Obey today. Obey today. What you want to hear is on the other side of obedience. So what is God saying? What is God saying to do today to you? To end this delay so that you can change, so that it can get better, so that the arrow can point up again. What is God saying to you to do today? What are you delaying? What have you been delaying? And then what is God saying to do? Look, I get it. Your husband, he's difficult to deal with. But what does God tell you to do today? Show kindness. I understand your wife, she won't let up. She won't understand you. But what does God say to you to do today? He says to offer yourself, to surrender yourself, to love her like Christ loved the church. Look, I understand you have a bad habit. What does God say to do today? I don't know. Maybe you need to delete the app. Maybe being on your phone at 11 p.m. is a bad idea and you should just stop that. Maybe you just need to pay the cost. Maybe you just need to tell them. Tell someone. What spiritual decision are you delaying? Like, do you need to confess something to God? Imagine how much better you'll feel and how much closer to your future that you want you'll be once you get that off your chest. Do you need to surrender to God? Do you need to restart that relationship with God? Do you need to take a step of baptism and you haven't done that because you're ashamed or you're not sure or all of these things? Like, why are you delaying? Why are you delaying? Maybe you're a Christian, you come to church, all these kinds of things, but let's just be honest. When it comes to being at work or being online or while you're dating people, you're not bringing your faith into that. What does God say to do? Don't be a hypocrite. I mean, come on. This is why. This is Why? Who do you need to forgive? And the reason why you don't have peace in your soul is because you haven't given them what God has given you, which is unmerited forgiveness. They don't deserve your forgiveness, but you need to forgive them. That's how you move forward. It's your pathway. It's your pathway to the change you want to see. And so whatever God is telling you to do, you know what my advice is? Do it. Do it. Show the kindness. Follow his word. Stop arguing with God and love his word and let his word transform you and let his word work through you and you'll be in a different destination. What if you loved to obey today? Hey, listen, even when you forget to do what God says, even when you're afraid to do what God says, even when you're just flat out unfaithful to do what God says, I want you to know this. No matter what you do or don't do, God will still remain faithful to you. See, his relationship with you isn't based upon your ability to do. He wants you to do because he wants a future for you. He's putting that in your hands. But God will always do what love requires. And he shows us so clearly as he endures pain on the cross. And every time you mess up, and every time you fall short, and every time you delay, do you know what God does? He forgives you. And he's hoping and he's praying that maybe today you'll hear his voice and soften your heart and you will obey and he can lead you to the life that you want to be, where you want to be. For the next few minutes, I'm going to put a few questions up on the screen. And I want this to just sit with you. What do you need to do today? How do you need to obey? And I want you to look at these questions. I want you to talk to God quietly. I want you to reflect on them. If you need to make a decision, we want to talk to you. If you just need someone to pray with, you just need to talk to someone about this. We've got some friends back in this part of the room in the 103, and they're just ready to pray for you. We've already told them, hey, there might be people coming today that just want prayer because they know they need help to get through today's message. And so if that's you, during this next few moments, we're going to play a little bit of music, and then Chris is going to lead us in communion. And I just want you to take us up on that offer today. Let me pray for you. God, thank you so much that no matter how I fall short, you are faithful. And even though I know the good I ought to do, I struggle, but you can overpower the struggle in me. You can change me. You can change us. You can transform us. And so, God, we just open our hands and open our hearts and say, God, what do you want us to do today? In this delay, so we give the next few moments to letting you speak to our hearts.